Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the next session here at our Broadscale Network event. I'm really delighted to have Van Jones with us. Van is a longtime friend. We were at Yale Law School together. Van, I don't even want to say how many decades ago that was, but I think we're talking
a few months ago,
early 90s together. And it's been amazing to follow your remarkable career as a civil rights activist and an attorney and a media personality and a TV show host and an author and now a leader of a media production company. And we're going to talk about this as well, a partner in a new investment fund focused on climate and ESG. So, so many different hats you've worn, so many different roles, and I'm really grateful for your spending some time with Broadscale and our both our corporate network members and some of our family office investors who are joining us here. So thank you for making some time.
Oh, it's good to see you again, brother. But we've been together for a long time, and I'm proud to know you. You've always had the biggest brain and the biggest heart in the room, and we need them both these days. So I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, Van. Thanks. All right, well, let's do a little bit of sort of history, because I think it'd be interesting for everybody here. I'm sure knows you from CNN. You've been on the network, I don't know, for a decade or something now, and they know about your political commentary and how incisive and thoughtful you've been following our national and global political stories. But folks may not know about all of the work you've done in the clean energy and green job space, even going back before President Obama appointed you his special advisor, AKA czar on green jobs, and I think that was 2009. But so take us back to, when you and I met. You were at Yale Law School. I remember even then you and I shared, we'd both done work in journalism prior to going to law school. And then how did you become an activist and an advocate, starting your first organization? You've started, I don't know, dozen organizations, it seems to me, but Ella Baker, I remember the first one, I think, right? So talk to us about the origins and how that got you into very early on the clean energy and green jobs movement.
Well, I grew up on the edge of a small town in rural West Tennessee, public schools, church every other Sunday, not gonna lie, but we weren't strangers. They knew who we were when we got there. Red state, public school upbringing. Both my parents are school teachers. My dad had been born in 44, segregation, poverty, joined the military to get out of poverty. My dad did. Everybody was running out the military. My dad ran into the military, and he came out. He put himself through college. He married the college president's daughter, my mother, because my dad was no joke. And he put his little brother through college, put a cousin through college. He put me and my sister, working with my mom, through college and through graduate school, law school. And when my dad died, the picture we put on the funeral program was him standing in front of Yale Law School the day I graduated, with his hands in the air, saying, "You're a ninth generation American, and you're the first one in our family that was born with all your rights, and look at what you've done." And so I felt, leaving New Haven, you could roll the credits on my life at that point. I was like, hey, I'm Willie Jones' son. I got a Yale law degree. I mean, shoot the confetti. I mean, I'm done. And but looking around, I saw a lot of kids on our campus who would get in trouble, and they would get help. If you're a Yale law student and you're experimenting with drugs, so-called, nobody calls the police. Nobody calls. I mean, maybe you go to mental hygiene, maybe you go to rehab. And I'm volunteering with kids in the community who would be quote unquote experimenting with drugs. They were called drug gang members and would get 10, 15, 17 years in prison. And I said, that's just not right. And so I felt, since I'd already made it, I'd already arrived, I didn't see anything, there's no higher thing to do than get a law degree from fancy school like that. I would want to go in the community and do work. And so I wound up starting the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, trying to get kids out of jail into jobs, and did that for about 10 years, burned out. Too many funerals with kids in the caskets and grown-up people sitting up in the pews, too many coalition meetings, falling apart, people fighting over money and credit, burned out. And then just trying to get my health back, Andrew, I started going over to Marin County from Oakland, just going to retreat centers and stuff like that. And I discovered this whole other world over there with solar panels and organic food and salads and all kinds of stuff we didn't have in Oakland, like just all kind of stuff, yeah. And I said, wow, why do I have to leave? Then I go back to Oakland and you got cancer clusters and pollution and no jobs. And going back and forth, Andrew, I said, the young people in Oakland need green jobs, not jails. These solar panels are not going to put themselves up. These organic, crops are not going to plant themselves. These buildings aren't going to weatherize themselves. Wind turbines don't make themselves. We could take the young people who most need work and connect them with the work that most needs to be done and fight pollution and poverty at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it was just like I can't tell you, it was like a revelation in my mind. Like green jobs, not jails. It was just this explosion in my mind. And I just went nuts. You know how I am. I evangelized the idea. I ran all over the country saying we should do it. And we got the Oakland City Council to help us to create something called the Oakland Green Jobs Corps to get kids off street corners trained to put up solar panels. This is, now getting to like 2005, 2006, 2007. Nancy Pelosi had just become Speaker of the House the first time. She found out what we were doing. She grabbed me by the hand, took me to Washington, D.C., had me testify in front of all of her committees. We got George W. Bush excited. He signed something called the Green Jobs Act in 2007 to take my program and spread it across the country through the Department of Labor. Next, that's 2007. Next year, 2008, I wrote a book. Sorry, COVID world. Somebody's driving past on a lawnmower. But then I wrote a book in 2008 called The Green Collar Economy. Trying to bring these ideas together. It becomes a bestseller, 6 languages. It was used in 100 US universities last year. Somebody on Barack Obama's team read the book. 2009, I'm in the White House. We had a $787 billion stimulus plan, which that time was a lot of money. Now it's nothing, but $787 billion, 12 years ago, is a lot of money. And 80 billion was for clean and green solutions. So I've become Obama's person, trying to connect this stuff to jobs. And as a result, learned a ton. We helped to save Tesla. We also, bet on a company called Solyndra. So I got a chance to see the good and the bad of all that. And left the White House under fire. The right-wing media was like, wait, but this berserkly crazy radical from Oakland is in the White House. I said, never mind. Left and, continue to, find ways to make a contribution. I feel that we're going to fail on all these climate goals if we can't find a way to make it less eco-elitism and more ecological, for lack of a better term, populism. We got to have a positive populism. Right now, populism is all negative. It's either you got to hate the billionaires, you got to hate the immigrants. I don't mean that kind of populism. I mean a positive populism where ordinary people can get excited and they can see, I can get more work, wealth, and health benefits out of these clean and green solutions than I could ever get out of the pollution-based economy. There's not that many more jobs in coal mines, oil rigs, but there's so many jobs that we could create. If we can create a longer table that includes the people who need more work, more wealth, and better health to become the consumers, to become the voters, and to become the entrepreneurs in this space, we can actually get all this stuff done and more. If we keep doing what we're doing, we're such a small slice of society even knows what's going on, we just won't have the momentum politically, socially, culturally, or even from a consumer point of view to avoid an ecological apocalypse outcome.
I love it. We're going to dig in. That's going to be the dominant area I want to focus on with you. But while you're talking about Oakland, you got to tell folks this story that you revealed for the first time in 2016 about who one of your major backers was in Oakland, supporting solar on rooftops and getting local folks to work on installation and all that, because that was one of the most remarkable, surprising things. I think I texted you when you announced that on CNN. So I'll let you reveal it.
Well, I was able to get a lot of stuff done after I left the Obama White House because I went from working with a president to working with a prince, which he used to always say, "Man, you got a promotion." So Prince Rogers Nelson, Prince, the megastar, the incredible artist. Most people did not know because he didn't want anybody to know. He was also an unbelievable philanthropist. And he refused to take any public credit. He didn't want anybody to know, but he tested me out and thought I was a good guy, and got behind a number of initiatives. Yes, We Code, that was all Prince money, connecting kids in Oakland to Silicon Valley jobs. Rebuild the Dream. I mean, a whole bunch of the initiatives I get credit for. It was Prince's money. Half time was his idea. Miss him every day.
You've also, and we'll come back to the point you made about the climate movement and making it the eco-populist movement. You've done some unusual things, and you've really focused a lot of your energy, I'd say, in the last few years on crossing political barriers and lines and trying to bring folks together. And again, I don't know if this constituency, since we're kind of mono-focused on investment and clean energy and all this, knows about, I mean, you've always been, as you said, an advocate for civil rights and criminal justice reform and prison reform, but you have a Reform Alliance group, and you did something unbelievable. I look at it and say it's one of the few bright lights during the Trump era, where you partnered with a bunch of folks. Of course, everyone focused on Kim Kardashian, but tell us about that work. You got the First Step Act done, which was, something that people didn't think get done. I mean, you remember, you and I, again, going back to law school, I was working on voting rights reform stuff, and my God, I mean, these issues still persist 30 years later, but tell us about that progress and how you did it in an unusual coalition.
Well, look, one of the things that I always try to remind people who care about the folks at the bottom. I've done most of my work, as you know, in the hood, Appalachia, Native American reservations, the border, people who really are hurting every day, is that there are not enough of whoever you are to solve their problem. There are not enough straight Black guys who vote Democrat to fix the problems of people who are, 2 million people in our prison system right now who are suffering, some of whom may deserve to be there, but nobody deserves the treatment they're getting in there, and everybody deserves a better shot once they come home. There's not enough straight Black guys in our 50s to fix that. I'm gonna have to work with other people. I gotta work with people who look different than me, who vote different than me, who pray different than me, who live different than me, or I'm not going to be successful. And what's begun to happen in our politics is identifying the problem has become enough. Now, I don't need that many straight Black guys in our 50s who vote Democrat to identify the problem. And now people to stop with that. As long as I'm righteous on Twitter, righteous on cable television, identifying the problem, maybe blaming somebody else, then I get my likes, I get my tweets, I get my shares. You and I'm from the old school. Just identifying the problem is barely the first step. You've got to come up with a solution. You got to build a coalition. You've got to solve it. You've got to monitor it. You've got to implement it. You got to learn. So I was shocked at how many people were shocked that I was willing to work with literally anybody to move the ball forward on criminal justice reform. The 200,000 people who are in federal prison right now, they don't vote. They're not allowed to vote. So they don't tweet, they don't march. They are literally the captive of our justice system. Again, some might deserve to be there, but everybody deserves to be treated better and have a better shot when they come home. Why am I going to be a hypocrite, Andrew, and go in and out of the Obama White House begging on my knees, give this person clemency, help me pass this bill, go to everything there, take 1,000 pictures with President Obama, 1,000 pictures with all the other celebrities who went in the Obama White House. And then the minute that the election doesn't go my way, I'm never going in the building again. Well, hold on a second. I thought you cared about all these poor people in prison. Oh, maybe you just cared about your own reputation and resume. So it never even occurred to me. I said, look, guys, Jared Kushner's father went to prison. And it was a shattering experience for that family. Jared understands. And I met Jared, I told Jared, I said, Jared, I'm gonna quote Jay-Z to you. With you, I got 99 problems, but prisons ain't one. Prisons ain't one. But I will work against you on everything else, but on this issue, let's join forces. And we formed a partnership and a brotherhood. And Kim Kardashian was a part of it. Newt Gingrich was a part of it. Pelosi was. I mean, by the time we got done, just focusing on what can we do to get people who really shouldn't be in prison home a lot sooner. with a much more job ready, much more transformed, especially and with some real concern for women, behind bars, moms behind bars. Once you focused on that, we wound up, Andrew, with 87 US senators. It would have been 88 if Lindsey Graham had gotten off the plane in time, but it was 87 US senators voting in favor of a bill that wound up getting 20,000 people out of the federal prison system. The federal prison system is now so small that we have to close some federal prisons because of a bill that we got Donald Trump to sign. Donald Trump signed that bill in the Oval Office and handed me the pen in the Oval Office. People said it's impossible. Nothing's impossible. Nothing is impossible if you're willing to put the people who need the help first and all the politics and BS second. And listen, don't forget, it was George W. Bush that signed the Green Jobs Act.
Right.
So this is not my first Republican president I've had success with. And what I would say to people in the climate space, this is not a problem you can solve by yourself. I don't care how much finance you bring to it, technology you bring to it. Implementation is a mother. And this stuff is going to be implemented in real companies, real communities, real neighborhoods, real homes. And the friction points are unbelievable unless you have real buy-in from local mayors and local leaders and union officials and teachers. You're talking about a civilizational shift. Your company that you're going to be investing in, you better make sure it's a good investment, do all your due diligence, but it's also a part of a civilizational shift. Mm-hmm. And that means everybody's got to play, or at least you got to give them a reason to play. And, look, I run the biggest bipartisan network on climate solutions as well, not just the Dream Corps where I work now. We don't just have the biggest bipartisan network, grassroots network on criminal justice solutions, and we do, but we also have the biggest bipartisan network on climate solutions. And here's what we're finding. Red state Republican farmers, red state Republican ranchers, fisher folk, and others are getting decimated by climate change. Floods, fires, droughts, heat. Minimally adaptation is required for them to survive. Now, Democrats don't talk to them because they don't vote for Democrats, and Republicans don't talk to them because they don't want to talk about the climate. So nobody's talking to them. I'm talking to them, okay? Veterans are coming home. There's not a single Pentagon scenario that doesn't include some climate catastrophe as a big threat to US interests. They were taught that stuff in the services. They're coming home. Young libertarian leaning Republicans, under 30, under 35, they're on board with the climate science. They don't want AOC's big government approach, but they would support what you're doing when you're talking about market-based solutions. So we talk about each other, Andrew, we don't talk to each other. And as a result, there's a lot of overlap that we miss and good that gets not done. And I like to solve problems. I don't need everybody to look like me, pray like me, vote like me, and think like me for me to get along with them. That's part of growing up in a small town. You learn to get along with everybody.
So let's use that as a opportunity to get deeper on climate and energy transition. So you've been doing this work, trying to find consensus, reaching across boundaries. I mean, when you reflect on the 10 plus years that you've been in the green movement, have things gotten worse or better in terms of division and common ground?
The worst thing I can say is it's exactly the same as it was. And it's been, close to 15, though I appreciate you keeping me young.
Well, because you just said it. Look, a George W. Bush may not have liked top-down government approaches, right? He may not have liked. I think it was Kyoto was the agreement that Gore kind of had negotiated that he didn't want to enact. Right. But now we have Republicans who deny climate science altogether. I mean, we've gone to a much deeper, further extreme in terms of, it seems, the polarization. So I'm looking to see, is that the case? And then what will be the equivalent, if I could use the metaphor, of your First Step Act in criminal justice reform that we could seek to do? And do you see any of that happening? We just came out of Glasgow. We had a whole session yesterday about Glasgow where, it's good for us. Why? Investor community is on board. Absolutely. Larry Fink at BlackRock's on board. the biggest asset owners are on board.
Right.
They're heading this direction.
Right.
The biggest businesses, all that you guys, the biggest tech companies, many of the businesses represented here who are incumbents. You're talking to the people in this Zoom who are trying to steer those huge ships in new directions. But the populace seems more divided than ever. So how do we pull those folks together and get them to see that this is a positive, that there is benefit, as you said, for red state, blue state, folks who are out of work, who are coal miners, folks who are out of work, who are in urban areas, who could be doing stuff that can't be outsourced?
Couple of things. Number one, politics is not rational. Business models tend to be a little bit more rational, and the consumer behavior may be somewhat irrational. You can bump that around with advertising, stuff like that, but politics is emotional. It's tribal. And people misread a lot of signals. They think, black voters, white voters, these voters, those voters. And that's kind of like, are you like me? Are you like me? And that kind of makes predictions. The biggest thing in politics, which nobody talks about, it's really not about, are you like me? It's, do you like me? Do you like me? And too many liberals and progressives give off all the body language and the signaling. We really don't like these red state folks. We really don't like these Fox News viewers. We really don't like these people with the MAGA hats on and the NRA hats. We don't like them. Well, once you signal that you don't like somebody, nothing else matters. Because now, in order for me to vote for you or agree with you, I've got to violate my own human dignity. You can't do anything with somebody who you think doesn't respect you. And so this is what this has been captured. This whole conversation has been captured too much by progressives who give off all the wrong body language. We got to knock that crap off. When I go talk to Trump supporters, as I often do, I'm passing bills in red states. I've done 22 criminal justice bills in mostly red states, Georgia, Louisiana, places it's hard to pass bills. And I'm in rooms. You got guys with the red hats on in the room with their arms crossed when I walk in. And some Republicans say, listen to Van Jones, he's really not as bad as you think. And they're sitting there, show me state stuff.
Yeah.
And look, I say, look, let's just be honest. I'm a black activist. I worked for Obama, and I'm now on CNN. That's 3 strikes. I'm out. I got nothing else. No reason for me to lie to you. We're already done here. So can I talk to you? I said, listen, with that resume, you guys might think that I'm mad at you. You might think I'm mad at you, and you'd be correct, but not for the reasons that you think. I'm mad at you because I need you. I'm mad at you because I need you. I can't have the country I want without you. You're some of the best people in this country. Many of you are small business owners. You're veterans. You're leaders in your union. You raise good families. Well, you might have some knuckleheads, but you tried. You're some of the best people in this country. And I could put you in a car, and in 20 minutes, we can be in a community where American kids are going to bed hungry, where American kids have not seen their father ever because their dad is either in a grave or in jail for doing the same drugs your kids are doing in college right now. These are American kids 20 minutes from here. And where the hell are you guys? These kids need you. They need your values. They need what you know. America's grandkids are going to look different than America's grandparents, but they're still American kids. And by the way, you need those kids too. Because they're some of the most unbelievable, resilient, creative, beautiful people on earth. You need them and they need you. And I'm not leaving here until we figure out some way to help them. And listen, it goes great because I also tell them, and by the way, stay in your party. Don't come in my party. My party's got enough problems. You stay in your party, make your party better. I'll make mine better. But what can we do to help these kids? And because I'm not calling them out, I'm calling them up, I'm calling them in. We've done incredible work together. The bill is the same bill. Your technology is the same technology. It's the human factor. Am I communicating respect? Conservatives, I was a cop in Glasgow. I spent my time with the conservatives over there. If you say conservation, they listen. If you say climate, they don't. Simple stuff that comes from listening, from being in the room. You know, when you talk about innovation and competition, they listen. When you talk about regulation it's just finding the right language. And that comes from just being in love with somebody. When you're just in love with somebody, and you're talking to them, you're hugging them, and you're holding them, and you're laughing at them, you're yelling at them, you figure out a way. And we have been too confident that we have the right answer, that we know the science, that everybody else just needs to stop being so stupid and join us, that we're now the stupid ones. Because that's not a way to convince people to change everything about human civilization that they know. They got to believe that we love them, that we respect them, that we want them. And that's a big part of what's been missing.
Fantastic. Actually, consistent with that work you've done across political lines, another thing I could have mentioned at the outset, but I'll just put it in here. I think people probably did hear this one because it's such an unbelievable thing that just came out of the sky, as it were. You got a $100 million grant, I guess you could describe it, from Jeff Bezos to use, I think I heard it described as you see fit, to continue this work of pulling people together and bridging political divides. What was that like? And what are you going to do with that money?
You know, you always wonder, like, when you see somebody like they win the lottery, right? And you wonder, like, what, that must be a weird Tuesday afternoon. So I have a little bit of insight into that. I didn't ask Jeff for anything. I mean, I think I asked him to, pass the ketchup a couple of times at dinner with him, but I never asked him for anything. And so it was a huge shock to me when he did that. And, and by the way, he went up in his own rocket ship for the first time, which I wouldn't have done. Like, if I built a rocket ship, I want you to go on it first, Andrew. But he built the first rocket ship and went up on it, came down and handed me $100 million. That was a pretty big day. It's all for charity. It's not for Van Jones. It's all for charity. And and I've got hopes and dreams about it. Michael Lithcott and I worked together at this thing called Obsidian, which you mentioned. And I hope that Lithcott will talk a little bit. But we plan to 10, 20x the money in terms of impact, in terms of how we move some of these climate solutions into tough communities and create jobs and work and wealth and entrepreneurship and contracts. We're working on a partnership with the Department of Energy, which I don't know if we can talk about. I'll leave it to Lithcott if you want to talk about it. But we are as serious as you can possibly be. The time frame is so short. I mean, this is the most critical decade in human existence. Every minute, every day that we waste on nonsense in this decade, our children are gonna blame us for.
Right.
And so that means you want elegant solutions. So if you have a solution that can create jobs for people who don't have jobs, that can create contracts for women who are not being respected and given other opportunities, that also is lowering carbon, that's also solving traffic. Like, the more, usually you want just a kind of one big dumb simple solution you can just run out and make a bunch of money on. That's great if you have a living planet, but if you're really starting to be concerned about where we're going, the more elegant solutions, the more multi-factor solutions that you can come up with, they should go to the top of the pile as you're making those considerations. But anyway, I deeply appreciate Bezos for doing what he did. And I told him, I said, no civil rights leader in the history of America has been given this much support ever. He said, well, what about Dr. King? I said, well, Dr. King got the Nobel Peace Prize. That's 1 million. You just did 100. He goes, oh. And he thought about it. He goes, well, good. Go get him. So anyway, I would love to, by the way, Andrew, working with Lithcott and Allison at Obsidian, I'd love to get help, advice, and counsel. Lithcott's a genius, but you got a bunch of geniuses here as well. We got $100 million. We can do whatever we want to with it. And I want to have 10x, 20x impact to take some risk and do some stuff that's hard.
Wonderful. So let's switch gears and talk a bit about Obsidian. I think Michael and Allison are with us here, and let's also talk about the bigger context, because we've talked about making sure that the climate movement reflects the diversity and equity and inclusion that we all aspire to. but that includes the climate investment movement, right? Making sure that GPs and LPs are taking those issues into consideration, and our startup ecosystem. I mean, Van, you spoke about Yes We Code. You're helping young kids to get into tech. Some of that tech can be used to solve the climate crisis or other ESG challenges. So Michael, if you're there, or Allison, can you give us like a minute on Obsidian and what you guys are doing in your approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to follow Van. I do it more times than I'd like, but I like to never do it because he's always so great. But really, Obsidian is just an extension of what Van's been doing philanthropically for the last 25 years. We started about 3 years ago. We're partnered with a multifamily office in Jordan Park. And we've started making investments in May. We've got 5 investments done now. It's about 40 million. We've got another 10 we're going to do by the first quarter. I think about 250 million, all around what we call values investing, which is really aligning our personal values with the value we can create by focusing on these enormous markets where we think there'll be really great returns over the next 10 to 15 years. And we have a very sort of Van way of investing where we take some what you call venture investment in the company, and then set up a more private equity investment where the bulk of the capital goes into JVs that are focused on bringing this breakthrough early stage technology around climate, housing, and shared prosperity or inclusive growth in the working class communities. And so, as you know, like you guys invested in Revel, we talked to Frank and team about joining their next round, but also setting up a joint venture to make sure that rideshare green infrastructure is in poor communities as well as in wealthy communities, and the returns are just better. If you look at GetAround, it's another investment we're both in together. GetAround has what they call power users, and those returns on those cars are like 40%. And so we're talking to them about a similar JV where we buy electric cars, we're investing in electric fleet management, and we empower these Black and brown business owners to put cars on the platform at cost of capital that's less than 10% what they're paying now, but then we share obviously in the upside where we're getting mid-20 returns. We're building electric houses and an infill factory in Chicago, where we have 2 broadband innovations. One is the first geostationary airship. So it's in the stratosphere, which is half the distance that you have in space. So imagine the whole space economy brought down by half, which brings all the technology effectiveness up by a factor of 2. And so we just signed a contract with the EPA to do methane monitoring, because you really can't enforce Kyoto or COP or anything or Paris without the methane monitoring that you need to do that, as well as rural broadband. And Van's an advisor on another company that we're making investment in with Cisco that does more fixed wireless point-to-point, a lot lower CapEx. So we're very, very, very excited about the innovations we're seeing in housing, climate, and with a focus of making sure that you don't have some of these scenarios that Van kind of pointed out, where gas winds up $8. There's no electric vehicle infrastructure in poor communities because there's no cars there.
Right.
And so over the next 10 years, you have all the infrastructure outside of those communities, so you can't have cars in those communities, and then they're paying $8 for gas. So you pushed all these levers to affect a certain point, and then you wind up with a situation that's really untenable for poor people and kind of unstable for the economy and the country. And so now is the time for us to make early and often investments in this infrastructure and make sure that those companies have a capital partner that is prioritizing these working class and low to moderate income communities, because the returns are there, but the focus isn't. And so that's been a really special thing we've been able to add. And by the way, most of these companies are purpose-driven companies, and their capital is not aligned into those communities. So if you're doing EV infrastructure, you go where the money is. Your capital wants you to go where they think it's a little safer and put infrastructure in the communities that can afford to buy electric cars. and our friend Elon made them very expensive. So there's really not a low cost solution there.
Right.
So they really welcome having an aligned capital partner who's not a lead, but who is focused on making sure that these breakthrough innovations wind up in low to moderate income communities. And where we can, we like to invest in founders that are diverse and from marginalized backgrounds, because they, need more amplification as well. So that's kind of Obsidian.
Terrific. Great. I want to open it up to questions from folks. I encourage people to put questions in the chat so we can curate them. Van, tell us, you said you were at COP, which is awesome. And you were with a bunch of conservatives. What is the eco-populist view of Glasgow? Do people, do you think, get it? Do they feel like progress was made, or does it, Greta Thunberg, the young activist, said it was all blah, blah, blah. So I don't know, like, what do you think people take away from it?
Well, look, conferences where people go to confer. So there was a lot of conferring. Look, we're all friends here. I mean, it felt like, playing ping pong on the deck of the Titanic. I mean, there's a disconnect between the level of urgency that the science would suggest and the abilities of states to respond. This is the authoritarian governments of the world are not developed enough to prioritize this in the way that they should. So they're going to continue to, China's still building coal. So that's, and the democracies are too divided and too slow to act. So this is a very bad, very, very bad problem, which just means that it's going to come down to the private sector. Like this is not a problem that's going to be solved by politicians. The bad Star Wars trilogy of the episodes 1 through 3, where I don't know why they thought it was good movies that have people like arguing in Parliament, like floating around. It's like that's what it felt like to me. It's like the bad Star Wars trilogy where everybody's arguing about the Space Federation, nobody's doing anything. And so I think it just makes it that much more urgent for us to get out there and take this stuff seriously. I don't know if you guys think about this the right way. Somebody slapped me upside the head and made me think about this very differently. If you have any kids in your life, your own kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, if they're in elementary school or below, they are probably going to be alive in the 22nd century, right? Given what medical technology allows for, given the actual, they'll probably be alive. So these hellscape scenarios where you have like a war-torn planet with, coastlines inundated and places that used to make food turned into arid deserts and wars, that's their life.
Might be sooner than that, Van. Might be.
No,
40, 50 years. We're already seeing signs of it this year.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, to the extent that we say we care about our kids and our grandkids, our nieces and our nephews, like, some of these scenarios could happen in our lifetime, but all of them are going to happen in their lifetime.
Right.
And so this is not some speculative, fiction for 200 years from now. This is literally your kids. And we got to think about it that way. And the problem is when you have this double-barreled crisis of the ecological problems getting worse, at the same time, the economic division getting worse,
right,
which is fueling the political division, because everybody knows that somebody's getting over on me, and so now the conspiracy theories make sense. You got to heal all that, and the way that you heal all that is you break out of all of the polarization, and you come up with solutions that heal the earth and that bring people together. You get a new human civilization more at peace with itself and the earth. That's the goal for this century, for everybody. All leaders have to be signed up for a new human civilization more at peace with itself and the earth. And based on that, you want to bring people together, even when you don't have to. Maybe you could ram it through on one vote, or maybe you could do it and leave all the Black people out, or leave all the women entrepreneurs out. But don't do that, because you're going to be feeding what you're fighting. You're going to be creating more division. And any opportunity that you have to heal division is a prerequisite for us solving the problem.
Beautifully said. Our senior advisor, Stefan Dolzalek, has a question. He's a longtime investor and climate investment specialist and has done a lot of other amazing work. Stefan, you want to jump in? Did I lose you?
Stefan's on mute.
I'll ask his question for him because I got it
Oh,
by text. Oh,
Can
go
you
ahead.
unmute me?
Yeah,
Can you
go
hear
ahead.
me?
You're good.
Okay. So I wanted to ask this particularly in the context of the Amazon commitment. You know, we work so much with the corporate world, and so many of our corporate friends are making sort of net zero, carbon zero challenges and commitments on behalf of the corporation. But I can't help but wonder whether what might actually be more impactful is what if, instead of Amazon, Apple, Google, et cetera, being net zero as a corporation, what if they enabled every one of their employees to be net zero in a way that allowed them to talk about how they're doing that in their communities? You know, because I really love this notion of our group is way too small. We've got to reach a much, much bigger group of people to whom we don't talk. And
That's very interesting.
you know, what would it take for us to actually go talk to all the people that work for the companies that we collectively work for and enable them to live the lifestyle that we're espousing? But they can't go buy carbon credits the way we can. They can't go buy electric vehicles. So how do we help them actually get to the point that we're espousing we all need to get to?
Well, what are some of the things that you think that those employees, that's a really interesting question. You're trying, look, man, you should be in politics. You know, that's genius in terms of trying to build constituency. I keep trying to tell people the job is to unite us and divide them. So like if there's some them, don't make them bigger by pissing them off. Try to get more of them over here with us. So, so getting bigger constituencies, that's kind of my job, not yours. But tell me what you think some of these employees might be able to do. Or how might that work? That sounds
Yeah,
great.
so I've started approaching this in the context of what we do at Grosvenor, because Grosvenor is a gigantic global property company. And so it's, you know, again, it's great that we can try and become as a company net zero. But what are we doing in terms of the people that live in our communities where we own those buildings? What are we actually doing with them? And it's not just in terms of how do we enable them to have better ways of commuting to work that are lower carbon, better ways of heating and cooling themselves. But a lot of it, particularly in the work I'm doing, is how do we feed them better? You know, and in your comments about Marin County are directly on point. You know, that so much of what we do are bad habits that people can change, but it's a combination of education and enablement and access.
Well, I like it. I don't have any I haven't thought about that before. I tell you, I'd love to work with anybody on any of this stuff. I mean, the weird thing is you've been on television, people return your phone calls, and you know that's half the challenge is just getting good ideas over the transom to people who might do more with them. So you know, Michael Lithcott and Allison and I are, you know, very curious about any good ideas like that and otherwise.
Yeah, we have 3 sustainable ag things that we're close to and have committed capital for, and so we're very excited about that space. Any interesting idea there would be helpful.
Great. Love that. That's a really actionable one we'll follow up on. Other questions? We have just a couple more minutes, maybe 5 minutes for more questions for Van or Michael. I'll ask one. Oh, here's Tim Krychek. Can we get a prediction? When will the fractions in the GOP over climate among farmers under 30s, the constituencies you spoke about, prompt a shift in the party policy on climate?
Look, on the criminal justice side, what we did is we got a couple of red state governors to go first. So you know, we got Texas, Governor Deal down in Georgia. And so then by the time we got to Donald Trump, we already had red state governors who were willing to tell the sitting president, hey, this is it's good stuff. We did prison reform, we saved money, we closed prisons, and we brought crime down, sir. And so what we've got to do is figure out who are the red state governors that we want to set up to be champions here, and then back them. And you can't have people say, well, we're Democrats, we can't support Republicans, and we don't like the rest of their party, we don't like the rest of their agenda. Would you please shut up with that? Because that's not how it works. People are not going to do in politics things that are hard if they're not going to get a benefit. That's just how it works. So people were mad that, Van Jones is giving too much credit to the Trump administration on their criminal justice stuff. I'm like, well, hold on a second. I'm kicking their butt on everything else. And then if they do the one thing I want them to do, I won't give them any credit. That just seems unfair. So we need to support, we need to find Republican champions and make it worth their while. I'll say the other thing too is that we make stuff way too complicated. Right now, there's 1.2 million people that live in West Virginia. Joe Manchin is gonna kill the whole planet because he doesn't want to offend them. Of the 1.2 million, there's 30,000 coal miners. I love them. In fact, the last time I went to jail at a protest, I was with coal miners from Appalachia in a successful fight to get them their health benefits back and their pension back. So I'm very close to those folks, but it's only 30,000 of them. We got the richest people in the history of the world on our side, and you got 30,000 coal miners in West Virginia, and we can't figure out a way to get them to jump the fence to us because we're giving all our money to not-for-profits and ad campaigns and stuff about polar bears and all. Guys, could you just back a truck up to West Virginia and just start shoveling out cash? That would probably be a much more effective strategy in terms of moving red state voters as well as party officials. Like you go where the pain is and start helping. That's gonna give you a lot more leverage.
And maybe even more than, or in addition to backing up the truck, go in there with training, try to get people learning.
Sure. Or hey, listen, that was my spiel 10 years ago. Now I say, how about just cash? Can we? I'm serious. Can we just
back up the truck?
Can we just?
By the way, you've got the cash now. All right, we have another advisor who's going to jump in. I guess one other point that I want to ask that, because it's so apropos of what you said about Glasgow, is of course one of the areas that I think people feel Glasgow was still a disappointment is we haven't resolved this issue of what the developed world is going to do for the developing world, right? So it's a macro of the same thing you're talking about. Yeah. So let's come back to that. But Dan Leff, our senior operating partner, go for it.
So Van and Michael, extraordinarily inspiring and clarifying, and thank you kindly for all of your good work and efforts. Your offer for us to jump in and help is heard loud and clear. And Andrew, Stefan, and I and team are going to work pretty hard after this meeting. I've got some ideas floating around to make sure that we get maximum mobilization and multiples on that invested capital out into the marketplace. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate you. That's awesome.
Awesome.
Look, man, I appreciate it, and I'll tell you before Andrew boots me off of here. I'm sure you guys got other stuff to do. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this call. I love Andrew and I love each other from the very first day. He's, again, like I said, the biggest brain and the biggest heart at Yale when we were there together. But I've had a very interesting life. I grew up in a red state, public schools, as I told you. I wound up going to Yale and teaching at Princeton and fellow at MIT and all that kind of stuff. So I've seen both sides. I was a grassroots radical outsider, and then I was a White House insider. I've been a target of the media, left wing and right wing. I'm a part of the media through CNN. I'm hard to fool. I work with Democrat and Republican presidents successfully. I'm kind of hard to fool. And I just want to give you a bit of encouragement. Those of us in cable news and other places are convincing you of something that's just not true. If you spend too much time looking at us and listening to us, you will start to think something that's not true, which is that we just have too many awful people in the country to get anything done. If you're watching, one set of it, it's, hey, you got too many awful Democrats, woke supremacists, PC, cancel culture people. What can you do with all these awful Democrats? Or if you're Republican, on the other side, the Republicans are all racists and bigots and cult members and coup meisters. What can you do with these terrible Republicans? Or the black people just want to get over, or the white people are all racist. There's just too many terrible people, too many awful people in the country. What can you possibly get done? And you will feel that the more informed you are, the more depressed you are because you're believing something. I'm going to tell you is not true. It is true that there are some awful people in this country of all backgrounds. It's also the smallest problem that we have. The biggest problem that we have is there's so many awesome people in both parties, all races, all faiths, all background, who just don't know what to do yet. We just don't know how to listen to each other, how to talk to each other. We just don't know the right things to do together yet. You don't have an awful people problem. You have an awesome people problem. And if you wake up every day knowing that you got awesome people everywhere and you just got to get everybody together, then you don't fall into depression. Just on this call, if you pick up your phone, just the networks in this call is enough to get to the next couple of tipping points just with us. So just remember that. You know, I'm doing everything I can. I got a new podcast called Uncommon Ground with Van Jones. I got a new
billboard in Times Square. I saw
a new billboard in Times Square. You know, trying, but you know, the talking is not going to matter as much as the action. And we want action. We want to work together with everybody. And I appreciate you, Andrew.
Van, it was so incredible to have you with us, inspiring, as everybody has said. I just saw another chat comment from someone who said, will Van consider running for public office? I offended someone. I apologize. but what we do need is the spirit and the philosophy that you've articulated here to win the day. And we don't have a choice. On climate, on the other issues we've been speaking about, if we can't find some common ground, if we can't move forward together, then we're, as you said, our grandkids are going to be inheriting a terrible world environmentally and in every other way. And so I'm incredibly excited that you and Michael and Allison are, you know, in the same orbit that we're in. We can collaborate. We can find companies to invest in together. Where we've already made investments, we can find new ways for those companies to tap into the resources of communities that they haven't done so before. I'm inspired to do it, and I'm sure a lot of our partners on the Zoom are as well. So thank you, Van. Great to see you after a while. And yeah, Michael and Allison, thank you for what you're doing. And we will certainly stay in touch.
All right, we'll say it again. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.